Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we're both sober and happy. I know many of us in recovery identify as people pleasers, and we often find ourselves saying yes to things even though we may not want to do them. Doing this can often cause us to stay in a place in our lives that does not serve us simply because we're worried about disappointing others. So how do we begin to make decisions that are not only best for us, but also for the people closest to us? How do we learn to start saying no? Well, that is what we're going to talk about today. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. I want you to ask yourself the following question. Is your sobriety and life being guided by the opinions of others? Think back to any decision you made recently. It could be something you decided to do or not to do. Was there a part about it where in the decision you made, you paused and thought about what other people would think? If you're a chronic people pleaser, the first thing that might pop into your head right now is, yeah, but I have to consider how my decisions affect others. And you are right. But that is not what I'm talking about right now. Let me give you an example to better explain it. I had many reasons that delayed me getting sober, much of which revolved around my desire to not disappoint other people. I thought that people at the bar would think that I thought I was too good for them if I stopped going into the bar. I was worried some of my friends were no longer going to want to hang out with me because they wouldn't want to be around someone who doesn't drink. I was worried that people would think that the sober version of me would be boring. Some of my people pleasing wasn't even about people in my life. There were imaginary people that I hadn't even met yet. I was worried about what people would think of me if I said no when I was offered a drink, or being judged if I said no to coworkers when being invited out to happy hour, even though at that point in my life, I didn't even have a job. I worried that some hypothetical future woman that I might want to date wouldn't want to date someone who was sober. Here's a little reality check. You cannot please everybody at any given time. When you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. When we decide to take on the identity of becoming a people pleaser, we are accepting an impossible task. It would be like trying to take the identity of being a bird. It doesn't matter how badly you want to be a bird, you still are not going to be able to flap your arms hard enough that you will ever be able to fly. For me to get and stay sober this time, I had to stop worrying about what others would think and ask myself what was most important to me. It was about being a better son. It was about being a better friend to the friends that would support my decision to create a better life for myself. You might be wondering right now, well, Tim, the examples you gave of reasons to quit are for other people, so isn't that people pleasing also? The short answer is yes and no. If you are doing it simply to get someone off your back, then yes, you are people pleasing. If when you sit quietly and think about what is most important to your life, and being a better parent, child, sibling, or friend is what is more important to you than upsetting your drinking buddies, then you are making the decision based on what is most important to your core being and not what others think. For a longer answer to that, I talk about whether you could get sober for other people in episode number 2 of this podcast about finding your why for getting sober. So if you're struggling with the decision right now, try this little exercise. Write out all the reasons for both sides of the decision. For this exercise, don't worry about whether you're being people pleasing. Just write down everything that comes to your mind when thinking about that decision. After you're done with this, let's go back to what I mentioned earlier, which is whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Now, this could apply both ways. When you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something else. As you go down your list, write the opposite of each reason. For the not quitting drinking example, if I give in and say yes to meeting up with my drinking buddies, what am I saying no to? I'm saying no to escaping addiction. I'm saying no to a better life. I'm saying no to building healthy, authentic relationships that do not revolve around drinking. And ultimately, I'm saying no to myself. On the opposite side, let's say someone is in a toxic relationship that's destroying them. They finally leave the relationship and the person is begging them to take them back. They're filled with guilt about the pain they're putting the other person through, but they know they should say no to getting back into the relationship. So in that example, when they say no, what are they saying yes to? They're saying yes to honoring their self-worth. They're saying yes to removing themselves and possibly their children from a toxic environment. They're saying yes to healing from that relationship. They're saying yes to opening themselves up to be able to find the type of genuine love that they deserve. With those examples in mind, go down your list and do something similar for each reason that you listed. If you are anything like me, this exercise will be very eye-opening. I knew I was a people pleaser before doing this, but I didn't realize that people pleasing was a main driver for almost all the decisions in my life. I realized that I was addicted to people pleasing. Many reasons can influence us to become people pleasers, but for me, the core reason was that I based my self-worth on what other people thought of me and not who I was as a person. So anytime I disappointed someone, I felt like a disappointment. Let that statement sink in for a moment. I labeled myself as a disappointment solely based on the reaction of another person when they didn't like that they didn't get their way. Knowing that it is impossible to please everyone all the time, this mindset set me up for constantly thinking that I was a disappointment, which drove me even harder to try to please people more. It is a vicious cycle that, just like addiction, only gets worse the more we try to control it. So how do we break out of that cycle? The first step is awareness. By going through that exercise I mentioned earlier, you will start to get a very clear picture whether or not your decisions are being made for reasons that are best for you or simply to please others. Another thing is to stop saying that you're sorry all the time if you have to say no to someone. To see what I'm talking about, watch how you say no to people. For the longest time, I'd always start any no with the, I am sorry, but... I want you to know that you do not have to apologize for doing what is best for you. This does not mean to start being rude, but if you're trying to get sober and someone who knows that invites you out for a drink, do not apologize for saying no to them. When we say we are sorry, we are telling them and ourselves that we're doing something that warrants an apology, even if just subconsciously. Go back to your list and see all the things that you're saying yes to when you say no to them. Let's say you're getting sober to be a better parent to your children. Would you apologize for being a good parent? Of course not. So stop doing it when you say no to something that would contradict you being a better parent. Now, I want to warn you that people in your life who are used to you being a people pleaser may not react well when you start prioritizing yourself and saying no. Some of them might even bring up your past behavior to try to guilt you into doing what they want. I know I had a few people in my life when I first got sober who would say things like, well, remember all the times you didn't show up because you were too drunk, as a reason to counter me saying no to them. Here's the thing. The people I harmed in my past deserved a sincere apology from me. If I did something that needed some sort of amends like paying off a debt, they deserve for me to make that right. However, what is not included in making amends is my owing them for the rest of my life for something I did in the past. This is where learning to set boundaries is crucial. Saying no in these situations is often not good enough because they will usually double down on the guilt and shame they are piling onto you. This is where we not only say no, but also let them know that we are not going to accept being talked down to and made to feel guilty when we say no. How we communicate this is crucial to strengthening our relationships and has probably been one of the most impactful things I've learned to do in my recovery. So if you're struggling with how to say no, I recommend you check out episode 19 of this podcast where I talk about setting and maintaining boundaries. I want you to know that it is okay to prioritize our recovery and well-being above everything else. I heard people say in AA meetings all the time that we need to be selfish in our sobriety, but I don't agree with that. When you're doing something that is best for you, it isn't being selfish. It's practicing self-care. If this appears selfish to others, that is because they are being selfish with their behavior. When I first started the Sober and Happy Facebook community, one of the members said something in a post that drove that idea home. He said, self-care is not selfish. It just feels that way sometimes. And it is okay if it feels that way sometimes. It shows that we genuinely care about how others feel. But don't forget that learning to say no does not make you selfish. It makes you strong. And by taking care of yourself, you're better equipped to show up for others in a genuine and meaningful way. So to all my fellow recovering people pleasers out there, remember this. Your sobriety is worth prioritizing, and most importantly, you are worth prioritizing. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. This week, I want you to think of one person that will benefit from listening to this episode and send it to them. Be the person who plants a positive seed in someone else's life today. You never know how much they may need it. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and keep living sober and happy.